Welcome to PlayStation Corner, my name is Alex and today we're going to be taking a look at Forspoken on the PS5. This one an action RPG with a promising premise of parkour and magic, but can it deliver on that concept? Well, that's what I'm here to find out, but first, a thank you to Square Enix for providing this review copy today. That all said though, all opinions contained, they are my own. So hit subscribe, join us here for reviews, deals, and PS Plus breakdowns weekly, and let's get started. Forspoken tells the story of Frey, a young woman from New York with a troubled past. She grew up on the streets, abandoned and orphan. She has little to her name, and she finds herself mixed up with the wrong crowd. In fact, the opening of the game, it places us in a courtroom with a potential third strike to our name. It's really quick to reinforce our situation. It seems we've been working for some criminals. We disappointed, I guess, and now they attack us on the streets. Before you know it, our home, including our savings, they are burnt to the ground. Now we are back on the streets homeless, simply looking to survive when we happen upon a magical fan brace or dramatic looking bracelet. We nickname it Cuff. It's not just pretty though, it actually transports us to the world of Athia. We discover here it can also talk, only we can hear that voice however, and we cannot leverage magical abilities. To top it all off, we are tasked with saving this world from darkness. This evil that we must fight, the Tantas, 4 gods that once protected this land are now evil, cursing this land with the break, and this essentially, it turns all living creatures into monsters. We of course however are immune, and so begins our journey. This game, in the lead up to launch, it's been surrounded in negativity. Many noted from the demo an unlikable lead and cheesy writing. Now first off, the story is not perfect. It definitely has cheesy moments, but it is enjoyable. It had twists and turns, some obvious, honestly, others though not so much, and eventually it provided a satisfying conclusion. When it comes to Frey as well, she's a character with a hard edge, and getting her backstory definitely gives you a window to understanding why. Her bitterness, for me at least, it felt justified. On that note, I will say, occasionally she definitely slips into angsty mode a little too often, but she does grow if you give the narrative a chance, and the character makes sense given the fact you're weighing up a desire to simply get home to New York alongside a population asking you to save their world, even though realistically, no one in your life has really ever helped you. It's very much kind of weighing up those different options. This is a place completely new to you, even if the supporting cast that do reside here are mostly likeable. Another common complaint then, Freya and Cuff have a back and forth dialogue through the action. If that is not for you, jump to the settings. You can change the frequency or even turn it off entirely so it accommodates all players. Forspoken then begins in the streets of New York City, though this is brief before it quickly transports you to Athia. This is the open world playground for the remainder of the experience, which will take you through a total of 13 chapters. This is a place made up of many regions, each with their own unique theme, from those destroyed by the Blight to those where vegetation has for the most part taken over. Enemies come in all shapes and forms, so from citizens or monsters I guess at this point, to the local wildlife that has been taken from the Blight. The only true safe locations in this world are rest spots, I think houses that you find along the journey. Camps, you can set these up yourself, though I rarely felt the need to use them. You can also be attacked still through the night. Finally, Sapala, the last bastion of humanity, and what I would consider the hub town of this world. This is where you will often uncover that next mission or dialogue exchange that really truly impacts the narrative. Weirdly though, think of this game almost similar to Mega Man, a weird comparison I know, but in the sense you start with a limited array of abilities, but by defeating bosses you inherit new ones. By the end game you can leverage fire, water and ice to great effect. These actually fall under 4 spell types, that's purple, red, blue and green. Each actually pack their own skill tree as well, so you can shape Freya to your playstyle. I also appreciated the leveling up of moves, as it's associated with challenges such as kill X amount of enemies in a certain way a certain amount of times. It could be seen as a grind to some, but for me, it just kept me wanting to be in the action. This all said though, honestly, the initial opening, say 3 or so hours, they are a little rough, honestly. I find it to be a slow build up, and you only actually have ranged attacks at your disposal in these moments, and that's definitely tough to get used to. For me, the turning point was a few hours in when I uncovered a melee option that definitely changed the game. It was what I basically wanted all along, and it made the combat generally so much more satisfying. Leveling up our moveset then comes in a few forms as well, and new moves of course, making those we have more powerful, and then uncovering support actions such as a ball of water that swallows up all enemies, or vines which will tie our enemies in place so you can attack freely. It's a game with a huge amount going on combat wise though, and it's definitely easy to get overwhelmed. I think that was noted from the demo as well, but stick with it and you will get there. The UI, definitely not the most user friendly. Think though triggers to change core moves, different pressure trigger presses for different actions, and even heavy attacks when an enemy is downed, or even simply switching magic. Many missed this fact in the demo. It is not a menu situation. A switch of attack types is as simple as pressing the D-pad left and right, and after a few hours you definitely start to get your head around it. Alongside the combat then, we do get the parkour, and this is by far the most entertaining element of the game. We simply hold circle, and this is automated as Freya leaps and bounds through this world. With progression then, we will unlock more stamina, though this is generous to begin with, and light beacons can be picked up around the world to kind of power you back up on the fly. We even uncover a grapple hook type maneuver, which I absolutely adored towards the end game. Actions then such as switching attack types and grapples are greeted with automatic slowdown, but that makes sense to keep the action as fluid as possible, and it definitely kept me away from making any simple mistakes. This will also be essential as well, this parkour, because we don't have a dedicated block button. Instead, Cuff does his part while he can to kind of defend you. He's very much a shield, but after that it's really going to be down to Freya's ability to kind of weave and dodge. This gameplay loop then, being an action RPG, is accompanied by a number of options. Think crafting, mainly for me that was the all important health flasks. We can pick up side quests and activities in the world, and we can adapt our gear, which comes in three forms, that is our cloak, our necklace and our nails. With all three of these gear items, new ones can be found, current ones can be adapted, from improving your health to powering up magic in specific areas. Do not be concerned as well if you get to the end game with side quests left to complete. Look, sure, with progression some are removed, but at the end you get free time to freely explore this world and tackle the content as you please. One thing that took me a while to understand here was, on initial exploration, you're not necessarily powerful enough to tackle everything ahead of you, and it really is okay to simply run. In fact, it's an absolute blast at times as you run away from the blight. I got to grips with this though after I died multiple times in the same spot, and it very much became part of my gameplay strategy. The combination though, parkour, magic, simplistic crafting, gotta say I found it rewarding. It was especially fun, scanning enemies, one of Cuff's core abilities, and really understanding which magical elements had the most impact against specific enemy types. The game also does a good job of initially restricting your exploration, not with invisible walls or poor excuses, but rather not giving you the skill set that makes many of the climbs and movements possible to kind of get that, I guess, regional advantage. Also the combat, it's just manic, and I have problems with it which I will get to here, but by the end game I was kind of going beast mode, unleashing specials, flinging my character all over the screen and holding my breath in the hopes of the best result, both a positive and negative in a weird way. The boss moments are a particular highlight, as we know a reward of new moves are going to be in our grasp, but they have some really challenging attack loops. A highlight boss, for example, the water element. Quickly after defeat, we unlock this ability though to surf on water, and that made it absolutely worth it. That is great fun and a development I did not see coming. Problems then, and honestly it's far from perfect. Great fun at times, but with issues. Facing multiple enemies, for example, incredibly challenging because there's just so much occurring that the camera can go all over the place, and the auto lock can be particularly temperamental. This is true as well from beginning to end. You just kind of start to learn to cope with it throughout your time with the game. It is particularly noticeable though in the early game where you lack any melee options, because these are quite a bit more forgiving. When they do unlock, as I said, it becomes a little easier to manage the overall kind of, I guess, attack strategy. Likewise, the parkour can get a little awkward in tighter locations, a turn radius just isn't enough and you end up sprinting up walls, hitting the wrong objects, maybe even missing the intended jumps. I'd say her automatic responses, it's 95% good, 5% in no way what you intended. Athia then, the world is huge, no question about it, and Frey's ability to move at such a quick pace is freeing, but it is quite an empty place at the same time, with many of the same structures are scattered throughout. Now in the wild locations this makes sense, but it's particularly noticeable in Sepal. This is supposed to be a bustling city, but rarely would you consider it busy. This is then noticeable in animations as well, where Freya, when on busy streets, can definitely struggle to maneuver. Think here it's going to restrict your magic and parkour so you can sprint slightly. You know, the excuse here, do not scare the citizens, but our navigation has us stuck on crowds, unlike, let's say, Assassin's Creed, where we kind of push and weave our way through. Finally, some of the side quests simply filler, and granted they are side quests kind of intended for that purpose, but following cats or going on slow walk tours of locations are particularly impactful to the game's overall pace, and after a few, I became quite a bit pickier with which I accepted and which I skipped. I think they could have done with less here, but of a better quality. Like many games in this genre then as well, they just seem unimportant. A great example, you're saving this world, yet some kids ask you to take photos. Kind of hurts the weight of the core narrative when we're messing around taking photos on a cell phone. My final note on the game, then I read an interview here, a main story that lasts 35 to 40 hours, and that's just not the case. I did a few of the side quests myself, especially did the challenge tombs. These are scattered around the world, they unlock new abilities to level up quicker, good fun as well, but even then I was just over 15 hours. Definitely not the longest of main stories, and I suspect 35 to 40 would actually be a large part of the way towards 100%. So overall, look, the game has its problems, but given all of the negative attention that seems to have surrounded its launch, I still had fun with it. The combat's not as tight as I would have liked, and getting used to switching skills and attack types definitely takes time, but once you do get used to it, it definitely delivers in making you feel completely overpowered and a bit of a badass. Sadly though, right now in its current setup, those combat maneuvers, the actions as well, I guess they feel a little bit too sporadic, if anything a little bit too random, and I'd love to see them work on that auto-aim system and just really kind of giving us that full control that I think the game deserves. Graphically then, the game has no question seen a downgrader since we were introduced to the title back in 2020. Now there's countless videos out there detailing this, but generally, I still think the environments hold up, especially when you factor in the scale. They are particularly impressive when the blight is in full effect, and more mystical elements are at play, such as floating islands or particle effects, a thing this game adores. The game also then presents you with two options, quality and performance. Quality is aiming for 4K, though it is adaptive, and 30 frames per second. Quality is 60 frames per second, but for me here, the resolution simply dropped too far. It was sub 1080p. I will add as well here, I noticed some minor frame rate drops in quality mode, and now I checked a sequence with a particularly large battlefield, and I momentarily hit 27 frames per second. There's just often so much going on screen though, I will admit it was difficult to tell. Problems for the visuals, well first off the texture detail can be quite low when you get up close. Pop-in is especially noticeable, think in the hub town where crowds will appear ahead of you, and then the cutscenes, they vary in quality. Now some are great, really impressive, others feel a little last gen with static or looping character animations, and every single one has this weird fade to black which makes the cutscenes feel, I guess, disconnected, and yeah, it just feels a little bit too cheap. Now I want to finish on a positive here though for visuals, and that is the magic looks incredible. The particle effects here truly are something special, and when things are in full swing, it's hard not to be impressed by everything that is occurring. Audio finally, it's decent. I enjoyed the vocal performances with the necessary backstory. I actually found the banter entertaining, honestly. It often had this dry sense of humour to it all, and the magic and the combat in general, they sound particularly impactful. The worlds can sound a little empty at times, if anything barren, and given the lack of population, definitely would have benefited from a bit more of a sound field. And then the music, it is solid, though not up with Bear McCreary's best work such as God of War or my personal favourite Battlestar Galactica. So overall, Forspoken, I really had no idea what to expect, and personally I was often pleasantly surprised. I won't say it's perfect because honestly it's far from it. It sometimes has dated visuals, an often empty world, and some questionable combat implementation such as the auto-lock system that I would describe as temperamental. Also for the larger scale of battles as well, I didn't add this earlier, but the camera can maybe feel a little too tight to our lead, and they could do with pulling it back just slightly. When all was said and done, however, I ended up having fun with it. The story is somewhat simplistic, but it had a few twists and turns that I did not expect. Freya has some solid moments, and her backstory kind of explains her bitterness. Then the combat, it can be somewhat loose, shall we say, but there's no doubt it is satisfying. Throw in then a clever implementation of grinding to level up your skills, and a constantly evolving skill set generally, and yeah, I enjoyed my 15 or so hours running through the campaign. Today, a good 7 out of 10 from me. It's definitely got its problems, this one, but overall, I just had fun with it, and sometimes that is more than enough. Will you be checking Forspoken out then? Let me know in the comments. With that, hit subscribe, join us here for reviews, deals, and PS Plus breakdowns weekly, and I'll see you all on the next video. Thanks everyone.